Welcome everybody from the Petersen. I'm John Marconi of the Marconi Foundation for Kids and Automotive Museum, and this is our collection. My father and I started the museum almost 30 years ago with the purpose to generate money for children's charities. His philosophy is learn, earn, and return, and that is our mission statement for the company. We put on fundraisers, we put on events 2 to 3 days a week sometimes to generate money for kids, and that is our main mission. Children are 100% of our future. And I think we've done enough to this planet and the way we run it that we need to make some changes. There are a lot of kids that go to bed hungry. There's a lot of kids that go to bed homeless. So it's up to us to be able to turn things around and make things happen. Now that we've shared our mission statement with you, this is what we use to generate the money for kids' charities. Let's take a look at some of the cars in our collection. Welcome to the Marconi Automotive Museum, Motorcycle Alley. This is Shiloh, our shop dog. People ask us a lot about whether we've ridden all the bikes. The answer is yes. My father and I used to take him out almost every weekend. Dan Gurney is just across the street, literally. And we used to take him out and ride out to down the 5 freeway to Ortega Highway. It's pretty impressive to watch Dan. The guy's a true racer through and through. We truly miss him. Dan drove a Sportster similar to this. It was a 5-speed conversion he did, and Dan is 6'6", so when he throws his leg over this bike, he dwarfs the bike. Some other things that we got, we have from Monterey County. We bought this at a charity auction. It's a Kawasaki Sheriff's, Monterey County. Vespa, which everybody has to have a Vespa. And then some of the Harleys and the different bikes that we've ridden, Buells and the Hondas. And over here on this side, we have the BMWs, the Bimota, and then our collection of Ducatis. We're real proud of those. The tricolor is always a wonderful thing to have. Let's step on into the main hall and museum. On my right, Al Unser Jr.'s last winning Indy car. It's in the Speedway configuration, so it's got the small wings on it. And at Indy, they're looking for the big speed. They're at 200, these cars were 240, 248 miles an hour down the front straightaway. So they want to lean them out as far as they can as far as aerodynamic drag. So that's why you see the small wings. Mario Andretti's last winning Indy car. This is the road race configuration. The max speeds they saw were like Long Beach Grand Prix is 160, 170 miles an hour down the front straightaway. So they're looking for as much wing as they possibly get to get the overall downforce and get the car sucked down to the ground. So those are some very unique cars, and we're really proud to have those. On the left, a very rare FX. It is one of one outside of the Sultan's collection. They spent about $6 million designing the car in conjunction with Ferrari and Pininfarina. It's the only one with a paddle shift system in it. It was sent over to Frank Williams and Williams Renault, and they did the paddle shift system. And from what I was told, they spent almost $1 million developing it, which is pretty unique. It's got a lot of money in that car. Next one over there was built for the Sultan's collection. That is a 456 Cabriolet or convertible called the Venice. They also built some station wagons and some other things that were really unique out of that. So we tried to get one of those. Those are a little cost prohibitive now, but it's a pretty incredible car. The next one we have here was Cher's car, and actually she never took possession of it. The story is Sonny had ordered the car for her, and as you can see, even back in the 70s, it was pretty wild. I mean, it's fly yellow, it's got the red and black interior, striped interior, so it was a very unique one-off kind of car. When the car came in, evidently there was rumors that she was having an affair with Greg Allman, and Sonny got pissed off and said, okay, that's it. It's a very unique car. It is all original, other than we did have to redo the seats. The seats started splitting over time, so we had to rework the seats. But other than that, the car is as it was when it came out of the dealership. To your right, one of the other unique cars we have, this is a 65 Shelby 350 GT. We got a signature up in here, you'll see it later, of Carroll Shelby signed it. I campaigned this car for, I don't know, probably around 15, 18 years. It was a lot of fun to drive, and thank goodness we didn't crash it. I mean, the worth of this thing just got appraised out. It's like $350,000 for a Mustang. I mean, you ask yourself, really? Is this actually happening? It was a lot of fun to drive. It's one of those cars that don't handle real well. It's what we call a pitch and catch. The greatest races that I remember, there was one of them. I went to the Palm Springs Grand Prix, put the car on the pole, and said, okay, I got this. I'm gonna just smoke everybody out here. And what happens is, I did not realize it, but Dan Gurney and George Fulmer both had their Trans Am cars here, and there's where their 69 and 70 Trans Am cars they won the Trans Am championship with. So I'm out there just flogging it, and I'm looking in the rearview mirror, and I see these two guys coming up, and I go, oh, I'm in deep trouble. I hit the back straightaway after the hairpin, and I'm in it for everything I've got. And these two guys came around me like I was standing still. And I still, to this day, get goosebumps that I shared the track with the two of the greatest drivers that ever lived. This one here, Monique needs to talk about this. She's got, and I want to introduce you to Monique. She is the CEO, and she's the rock star that runs this operation. She is now the third generation. So it's been handed from my father and myself to now it's being run by her.
This was donated last year by Ed Fuller. This was his first car he ever owned. So it's a 1968 Mustang Coupe. He originally bought this car in Massachusetts after he graduated from Boston University. And so after he joined the Army, he got stationed at the Frankfurt Airport in Germany, and they flew the car over with him. So he was able to drive it all over Europe. After that, he got stationed or sent to Vietnam. He made it back from Vietnam and he started working for Marriott. He took Marriott from 12 hotels to 550 international before he retired. He had retired the car long before that, and then he went through and fully restored it because it was very important to him and it was his first car. He wrote to 7 different museums in California looking for its forever home. He ended up picking us, and so now we have the car on display. It's obviously gorgeous, and almost everything is brand new.
When the car was built, it came with a 6-cylinder, 1 mirror, left-hand side only, and that was as cheap as you can get it, and an automatic transmission. When Ed got done with it, overboard is a whole new meaning. It is a notchback. It's not the real desirable body style. You know, if it was a fastback, everybody would make a bullet clone and make it a hot rod. What he did is put a EFI, electronic fuel injection. It's got a 302 that's just a monster motor. It's got a 5-speed transmission in it, which it never had a little automatic. So the car is completely done, and the paint is original color, but you can walk into this paint job and walk back out of it. He must have put $5 grand into the paint job alone. But the big picture is the car, he spent $135,000 restoring this car to where it is you see today. It's got Wellwood brakes, it's got all the trick stuff on it, it's got late model air conditioning. I mean, everything in this car has been completely, hell, the Grant wheel is $600 that's in the car. So he spared no expense putting his baby back together. And like Monique says, he wanted a place for it to live. Like I said, it's not a real desirable body style, but we've fallen in love with it because people would just look at it and they'd part it out and put it in a fastback or something that's worth it. But this has got Ed's heart and soul in it, and it's part of our agreement is the car, it stays exactly the way it is, and we love it. I mean, you walk down this row of some very substantial cars. You got the T-Bird, you got the Shelby, you got the Boss 302, the 428. This one still gets most of the looks. It's pretty amazing on this car.
Its nickname is the Burgundy Beast, and that's who the guys in all his Army buddies, that was the nickname going in. We love cars like this, and it adds so much to our collection because even if it's not the most desirable year or the most expensive version of the car, it's the story that makes it. It's the history of the car, so that's why we love it.
That is, the history on these cars is really what's the important part. This is a 69 Boss 302. It's one of my dream cars. This we got years ago, about 40 years I've had it, my personal car. And the interesting thing was it had a problem with the 302, so we pulled the 302 out of it and we put it on the shelf. We put the big thing was I always wanted a Cleveland, so we put a 351 Cleveland in it. It puts out about 450 horse because we drive these cars. All these cars you see here in the museum have to be driven. If you don't use them, you lose them. Seals dry out, you got all kinds of issues with them, so you have to run these cars. You got to get them up to temperature and you got to take them out and drive them. Like I said, you lose them if you don't. So what we did is put a 351 Cleveland in it, had to put some heavier springs in the front. Car was a lot of fun to drive, still is a lot of fun to drive, and you can go out and abuse it and have fun, and you can always put it back and make it better than it once was. Next wing is 428 Cobra Jet, or 428, 1970. Always a fun car to drive. We just got done with a whole bunch of work done on it. We put clutches in it and with a 2-stage clutch and all kinds of things in it. And it's just another one of those iconic cars to drive. This is a Survivor 71 Ford Mustang, Mach 1 with the ram air system on it. So that is a complete Survivor car. What we had to do is the 2 door panels were so bad that we had to pull them out. We got new door panels on order, so we're gonna kind of antique those up and continue that same look. Just put a couple of head gaskets in it, new exhaust system, and just to make it and keep it the way it is. It's one of those iconic cars you don't want to mess with and you don't want to restore because it has one of those natural beauties. 71 Hemi Cuda. This is one of the ones that Vincent has got magazine covers on. My oldest son has got 5 or 6 magazine covers before the age of 21. This is one of the cars that he built. It's got a 472 crate Hemi in it. It started out as a 340. And we wanted to put an elephant motor in it, so it makes about 550 at the crank and about 550 at as far as foot-pounds of torque. We cut up steel wheels, made them wider. We got 9s in the front and 10s in the rear. So we put a B-body rear end in it, so we could put the bigger tires and bigger wheels on it. It moves the leaf springs inboard, so that we don't have to mini tub the back and tear the car up. So it's a lot of fun to drive. You just can't get traction down. There's not enough tire underneath it to really put it to good use. It's just every time you smash the throttle, it talks back to you and lights the rear end up. Interesting story about this. I want Monique to tell this story because as I've told it more and more and more, I want to make sure it doesn't get tainted, and she's got the original story on it. So
this is a 1971 340 Cuda. It was originally a snow white car. This is Sassy grass green. We honestly get more head turns. We take these two out together a lot. This gets more head turns than the Hemi does.
Well, it helps that your mom's a tall blonde too.
Yeah, also true. Usually blondes are driving it. So my older brother, Vince, and my dad used to do restorations on muscle cars and Mopars out of our garage when Vince kind of discovered the mechanical gift, and that was what he felt like his calling was. So they were working on this car for a client, and my mom had walked by and she goes, "That's a nice car. I like that car." And she doesn't usually, she loves cars and stuff, but it's not a huge, it's not a huge deal for her. So she saw it, her favorite color is green, and she loved the car. So unbeknownst to her, my dad buys the car for her, and he surprises her for Christmas with the car. So Christmas morning, she comes out, it's got a big bow on it. At the time, this car had burnt valves. And so they had to do they were definitely a lot more work that needed to be done. So he surprised her with the car and a brand new motor hanging with a big bow on it too. So she saw it, she was really excited. She took it for a drive and she's like, honey, this thing handles like a pig. Thank you. So he goes, well, sweetheart, it's got burnt valves. We have to replace the motor. And she said, okay, well, when's it gonna be done? My dad and my brother looked at each other and said, well, we got time, let's do it. So they did a full motor swap before Christmas dinner that night and surprised her with it. So it's a cool car, we love it. It's probably one of my personal favorites to drive.
This is a 550 Maranello. This was one of the early, it was more like the modern day Daytona. As the Daytona evolved, this is kind of where it ended up. The 550 Maranello's got a front engine V12, fuel injected. We've gotten a chance to drive it. We've taken it to Monterey several times. and it's just a beautiful touring car, and it's got plenty of power. And it was one of the first Ferrari, when they entered into their 200 mile, the car does 198 miles an hour as it sits stock with a little tune on it and some exhaust. It'll push over 200. So this was technically when they were breaking into the 200 mile an hour mark, and in 1997. So it was pretty far ahead of its time. This was my father's car. It's his favorite car. He always told me, he said, if God had ever built a car for the Pope, it would be the 550 Maranello in white. Okay, we got over here a TR 512 and a TR. The interesting about the TR, the next evolution was the 512, power steering, the bigger motor and all kinds of other stuff, and it was just a more human car to drive, a lot more fun, a lot easier to drive, better brakes. This is an 85. Now the 85, was interesting about the car is the 85 had one mirror. If you saw Miami Vice when they blew up the Daytona, which was a Corvette, and the story of Enzo said, I'm tired of seeing that, and gave them a white Testarossa to be able to use in the series. But the mirror was up here. So why a company like Ferrari, a race-driven and race-bred company, would turn around and put a mirror right in the middle of the apex when you're looking into a corner? It just didn't make sense. My dad is blind in the left eye. He said, get this mirror out of here. I've got to figure out how to make it work. So what we did is we took the mirror and moved it down here, this triangle. This is before anybody had done this. We built this triangle in here out of aluminum, inserted it into the window set, and then moved the mirror down. He said, now I want one on the right. So we had a guy clay that, and he carved that out and casted it, and then we had it built out of aluminum. We put the guts out of this mirror and put a second switch in there, so we had a mirror that was adjustable, and moved it down. So this was a modified car from the mirror up here to the mirror down here, and it fakes everybody out. The guys who are aficionados look at, or gals, and say, look, this mirror's not supposed to be here if it's accurate as far as the age of the car. So that's what we ended up doing to modify the car, and then Ferrari went on and did that on the next two productions after that. The mirror got dropped down to the far corner, and their concern was you couldn't see over the hips of the car, and the fact is you can actually see over the hips without a problem. So I guess they were little short Italian guys like me, and they couldn't see down there very much. So when they got to the tall Americans, it changed, and so we were able to see down and over the top of the mirror. These are some of the race cars that we decided to keep over our lifetime in racing. My dad and I either raced all or part of all these cars. Matter of fact, we raced all of them. Either I would race them or he'd race them. We'd take 8 or 10 cars, 5 to 7 cars over to different vintage races around the country, and we'd campaign these cars. Brian Redmond's Formula 5000. First time I saw that car when I was a kid was at the Long Beach Grand Prix, and to think that we'd own it someday was an impossibility. KK Rosberg drove this car to the World Championships. I then campaigned the car for about 20 years and never got beat in the car. And the reason it's pink and Excita was a French condom company back then, and in the 70s, that's not something that you talked about. It was kind of taboo, but that's who sponsored it. And it was pink. We were faster than hell with that car and set all kinds of track records. It's an amazing car. Chevron, this is a Chevron B34, this is a Chevron B25. This is a Formula 3 car. Little fast car, it's the early stuff like the Lotuses and things like that, and it was really a trick car to drive. Lotus 23, this is one we drove. It's got a twin cam Lotus motor in it, which is based on the old Ford Cortina bottom end, so early Ford stuff. So it's a real neat car. Technically it's a 2-seater, but it really isn't. It's a right-hand drive. They kept the second seat in there. That was part of the specifications you need. It was required to be able to run the car in that particular class. 348 Challenge, we won the US Championship with that car. And then I went over to Italy and came in second in the World Championships, first in the World Time Trials with that car. It's been a neat thing. It's definitely historic. And to win the championship was, you can't modify the car. They have base information for safety, or base product they put in it for safety, seats, stuff, roll cage, things like that. Fire extinguisher system, you can't modify the car. So it's basically a driver's series. Mini Cooper, it's got some unique history. It's training wheels. This was my wife's car. My wife was campaigning it, and she was winning the first of the race series. She had won 3 races, and she was doing a hell of a job. Got out, she said, I don't feel well. Turns out she was pregnant, and so we had to pull her out of the car. She elected to get out of the car. It was too dangerous to be able to drive with a baby, obviously. So she was about 2.5, 3 months pregnant, 2.5 months pregnant, and she was driving that car. Well, as the time goes on, we have our first child with Vincent, and then she got back in after about 2.5 years, started racing again. You know, she's same thing, same series. She's about 3 races into it. She's winning the championship, and she's not feeling well. So she finds out she's pregnant with Monique. So both my oldest kids, that was before Colt was around, my youngest, but both my oldest kids, were in this car in the womb. So that's where they get their race genetics. .300 SL. It's an iconic car. What can you say about it? You take a look at where we were, you know, and you look at the car, the lines, the aerodynamics in 1954, and what we were doing. You look at a 54 Chevy, for instance, 54 Ford. To go 90 miles an hour, it's like, ooh, that's scary, okay, because the car didn't handle well, it didn't do anything well. You take a look at the Germans, and this car was capable of doing 150 miles an hour with direct port fuel injection, I believe it's direct port fuel injection, and a 6-cylinder. And we had these big V8s we were grooming and everything else, and these people, the Germans, were going 150 miles an hour with this car. I mean, the SLR that Sterling Moss won the Mille Miglia in, he was doing 160, 170 miles an hour in that car. So it was pretty amazing how far the technology came, and the Germans were so far ahead of us as far as the complexity of the car, the aerodynamics. They understood aerodynamics, and we were just playing with aerodynamics. A couple of our Panteras, that's got a 428 side oiler in it, makes 1,100 horse with nitrous oxide. It's a real pristine GTS. Take a look over here. We've got a 37 Foxfire fire truck. There's an interesting story behind this. My dad picked up Vincent, who was probably around 4 or 5 years old at the time, and took him out to go get him a birthday present. So they're gone for about 3 hours, and we're starting to get a little panicky. We figure, oh, maybe my dad left him at the mall or something, because he didn't spend a whole lot of time with the grandkids because he was very, very busy. So consequently, what happened was we finally get a hold of him. He said, come on down to the museum. He said, I got Vince down here. So we come down to the museum, and this is sitting on a flatbed trailer out front of the museum inside the parking lot. And I'm going, oh my gosh. I figured he was going to go out and get Vince a toy fire truck or something from Toys R Us, and he rolls in, and here it is. So we're looking at this going, oh my gosh. And me as the kind of analytical thinker, I said, Dad, how are we going to get this in the museum? The doors over there are only 10 feet wide. So we ended up having to re-engineer the door. We cut a 16-inch hole in it, put a new door in so that we could get this fire truck in here. And I tell you what, it takes 2 monkeys and a gorilla to drive it. That pump alone is 2,000 pounds. The motor's 3,500 pounds. And you got all this weight over that front axle and that steering wheel. Those guys who drove these fire trucks were animals. These guys had to be tougher. It boiled, it was just amazing to be able to put that kind of force in it to drive this car or this truck. So we ended up putting it in the museum. We were going to use it for parades and things like that. It was so difficult to get it out of here. Here's where it stayed. And this is where its home is now, and it hasn't been moved since. This is an unusual car. Bob Bondurant was a very dear friend of ours, the family's, Bob and Pat. I was testing with the Formula Atlantic, which is on the wall up there, getting ready for the Long Beach Grand Prix. I didn't know it at the time, but I looked over this barbed wire fence, and there's this guy out there with his hat on, a Volkswagen thing, and a skip loader. So I climbed out of the car, went over the chain link fence, the barbed wire fence, and asked the man what he's doing. He turns around, it's Bob Bondurant, and went, oh my gosh. He looks at me and he goes, that last apex, you're taking it way too early. You need to step it up, slow down the apex, take a late apex, and hit off in the corner faster. He said it simulates, and he knew exactly the turn it simulates over at the Long Beach Grand Prix. So I'm sitting there going, it's Bob Bondurant, and I'm still in shock. He said, can you drive a tractor? I said, yeah, my parents have a farm, I can drive a skip loader. So he goes, okay, hop in. So he starts moving dirt around and everything else, and he's getting this Volkswagen thing and driving all the way through and figuring out how to lay the track out for his driving school. That's where I met Bob Bondurant. All the kids from that day on, when they turned 15 and a half, 16, Bob would take them at 15 and a half before they had their true license, because he knew they all raced go-karts and stuff. And we'd send them to the Bondurant driving school. So when Monique finished the driving school, Vince went through it, Monique went through it, and then Colt, we had to go because Bob had passed. We had to go to a different driving school for my youngest. We then bought the car at the end of the year. This was my daughter's car, and Bob and Pat and Monique were in it. And so we then took it and gutted the car and just turned it into a race car underneath. The problem with that is the car is now going faster than it is safe. That roll hoop in the back, which you think is a roll bar, is not. It's a tin top that holds the top in place. So the big picture is if you put this thing on its head accidentally or unintentional, it crushes right to the sill. So we just said, okay, we got to pull the plug on this, and we took all the race suspension, put it back to stock, left the wing on it, so we got 8 holes in the back. Other than that, it looks exactly how it was run. And we've moved them, all the parts, into the new Z06. This Z06 we picked up with a salvage title. It was an interesting story. And you see these stories about these cars. The guy blew the motor up. He put a blower on it, blew the motor up. And what happened was it was in his garage, and evidently something went on between he and his girlfriend, and she picked up it was a brass lamp and broke every window in the car. So, but by the time it got done, it ended up the insurance picked it up. It was a salvage title. So we bought it from the guy I'm working with, and we moved all the suspension over to this. And the ground effects all go on it within the next week and a half. A full roll cage goes into it. We got a program with a museum that will be taking the race car out and going out to different tracks and taking people with us on a raffle program. So it'll be a lot of fun to be able to have customers and people come out of the museum and to go out and spend a day at the track day. So it'd be, and run the car at 7, 8 tenths or as fast as we want to go. Next car is very unique. This is the Knight Rider that David Hasselhoff drove, and it is the real car. This is not a replica. It's got a computer system in it that talks back to you. It's got the real lights. It's got all the camera housings underneath, the 2x2s, box tubing down there to put all the cameras in the front. There is a chain drive that goes from this side over to the other side, and there's a shaft that goes out. It folds down the rear seat, and there would be a guy sitting in back with a seat cover over the top of him, so he'd slide in when David would call him for to come in and pick him up, and Kit to come get him, and the guy would sit there with a seat cover over the top of it. So if you look at some of the episodes, you can kind of see a lump in the back seat. It's a guy sitting back there driving. It's got the cables in it and everything else, and all the stuff that goes forward with it in the dash. So this is a very unique car, and it is, like I said, it's the real deal. The next one we've got is, most of you will recognize, this is also the real deal. This was the Michael Keaton Batmobile that was used in 2 different movies. It is an Impala SS, I think of 1986. It's been cut and lengthened 19 inches. So that's a basic Impala drive line underneath the car. So, and this is the one that blows the flames out the back. We've been working on it, got the cap off it. We got the injector set up so that it will blow flames out the back. So we're working on that now. We're going to convert it to propane. It's a little less volatile to handle versus JP5 jet fuel injecting it in. And it's got a blower assembly in the back of it. So it's not an actual jet motor, but it does blow flames out the back, and it looks pretty impressive. You can see it on the movies. It's got a hydraulic rise system, so you can get in and out of driveways and load it in the trailer. So it's quite low, and we've had it out on several occasions to be able to do some shoots with it on our Instagram for the museum. And the biggest problem we have when we take this car out is people. You drive it out, and all of a sudden it attracts people, and I will say like flies. They're everywhere. I mean, they're stopping on the side of the roads, and we get it down the end of the block, and we get a right-hand turn, and that's all she wrote. People stop, and they're looking at the car and doing it. Even with police escorts, they're just saying, we're trying to keep them back just so we can get the shoot in. And the car is a magnet. I mean, you roll it, and it goes. It's pretty impressive. It's a neat car. On my left, Dukes of Hazzard. And that is the real car. That's the promo car that was used to promote the series. I believe this was in 1968. I'm pretty sure it is. Normally you can tell between the 68 and the 69. These have the shaved lights. The 68 has a round dot light. The 69 has a triangle or a rectangle light that goes here on the. That's how you can tell the difference between the 2 cars. Because the plastics in the front and the plastics in the rear were the same. So they would just move it around, except for the rear tail lights. To give you an idea, just, these are near and dear to my heart, the Chargers. But this car is one of the survivors that made it through the transition. There were 370 of these that were completely destroyed. There's been a couple of them that have been restored, but I mean, they were completely destroyed and they end up being in junk piles. From what I've been told is they would hire people with helicopters to go over people's houses and look down to see if there's any chargers in the backyard, because they ran out of chargers for the series. So it was pretty crazy. Unique part about this car is all of the actors that were in the movie, it's the primary actors, signed the deck lid. It's been cleared over, but you can get an idea. And everybody goes, all the guys come up and said, okay, where'd Daisy sign it? So this is her signature down here and her little love note. This is our Formula One collection. It's very unique. To me, it's near and dear to my heart. These guys, I got a chance to meet all three of these drivers. I actually did not get a chance to meet Senna. Michael Schumacher's car, Nigel Mansell's car, Ayrton Senna's car. These are all cars that they had time in and raced, and it's a very unique to be able to have three of their cars, each one of the top drivers in the world here. Welcome to the race shop. Take a look and see what's going on in here today. This was Kenny Bernstein's first 330-mile-an-hour pass car. We bought it from Kenny directly. People ask, how'd you get it up on the wall? Trust me, it was brutal. Over here is a unique piece. The story is when Lamborghini went to Enzo Ferrari and asked him to build a Lamborghini car for him, there was some kind of altercation. I don't know if it was verbal, whatever it was, and the stories vary all over the place. But obviously that didn't happen. Lamborghini went off and built his own line of cars. The interesting thing was Lamborghini was the John Deere of Italy, just like Porsche was the John Deere of Germany. So this is one of his examples. This is a 1960. We're getting ready to do a restoration on it. So as we progress in there, we'll start showing that on our Instagram and the restoration of the tractor. This is our, it's the Prowler, it is what it is. It's a lot of fun to drive. This is kind of our parade car. It's got the Marconi Museum branding on it. We take it different parades and different displays, and it's just a blast to drive. It's got a little V6 in it, aluminum block, and it was one of Chrysler's experiments. They were always cutting edge, like the Viper here and everything else. They would always push the limit, and like I said, a lot of fun to drive. This March was Niki Lauda and Jody Scheckter drove this at the South African Grand Prix and won. This was the car that they had. It's been completely restored. It's going to go out in the museum here very shortly as soon as we get reorganized. We've got some lifts and things coming in to be able to get a little more space on the ground. We also have Premier Auto Housing where we store people's cars. They come in. For instance, like this Testarossa. Probably one of the rarest Testarossas in the world. It's got 156 miles on it. So it's been well taken care of and well serviced, but it looks like he's getting ready to sell it. So it's an interesting car. Down here, our 355. When I won the championship in the 348, the 355s and the F40s were coming off the assembly line. So I got a chance to spend some time with Montezemolo, who was president of Ferrari World and Fiat World. I'm standing there in the factory with these guys who won the championship, and he goes, okay, what do you want on your car? So we ordered a car in fly yellow, and I said, what's my options? He said, whatever option you want. So the F40s, the interiors were being put in the F40s. I said, okay, I want those seats. I want that interior. So they put the F40 seats in it, carbon seats. They did some suspension work. They got iBox springs in it, which they had to order and bring in, so they're a heavier spring. And they did some other suspension work and custom built the car for me. And this is before you can get a custom build sheet. You couldn't exactly build the cars like you can today. So, I mean, I was privy to be able to do that, privileged to be able to do that. It was a really neat opportunity. The Dino, right now the motor's out of the Dino. We're in the process of rebuilding that. The car did not get driven enough. Coolants don't get changed enough. And what happens is, eventually, the head gaskets will go and start leaking and there'll be issues. So what happens is we lost the head gasket in it. The motor's out of it. Vince is in the process of rebuilding it now. So that should be going in within the next month or two. So we get that back together, and getting parts are always difficult for these early cars. BMW M1, This is one of two we had. The orange one we sold back to a gentleman in Germany. This one is in the process of getting some work and some tune-up work done on it. That's why it's in the race shop. So we're going to get ready to do that. Over here is our F40. The F40 Vincent just got done doing a major on it. The interesting thing about a major on these cars, you have to pull out damn near the heads off. So you get everything off the top, you pull the cams out of it, you check the lash on the cams, and what you do is you put new, what they call pucks in it, and that compensate for the extra lash you have it to get it back to specification. What happened was we lost the turbo seal in the right bank, so we pulled the turbos, had those rebuilt, and Vince just got it back together. Matter of fact, the rack is out right now. We're getting bushings built for the rack, so that will be going in within the next couple of days. Shocks have all been gone through, differentials gone through, the half shafts, axles, CB joints, and everything has just been tuned up and dialed in. So it's all back together now, but if you look at our Instagram, you can see the steps we went through from the beginning when we started the car and putting it back together. Vincent, you have a minute? Yes. So I don't like to bug him when he's in the middle of one of these things. You screw up here and you got a big problem. This is Vincent Marconi, my oldest. And he's our master mechanic here, and he cut his teeth on these. Like I said, he's at 15 years apprenticeship program, you know, working on these cars, and this is old hat to him. And if we send them out, it costs a lot of money. You know, to do a major on the car like this, you're looking at $8,000 to $9,000, $10,000. If we do it internally, it's a lot easier, simpler, and it's a lot more cost effective. So, and our mission here is the more we can save. I'm all free. The rest of the guys are on a small salary, and so what we do is the leaner we can run the museum, the more we can generate money for kids. I'd like to thank the Petersen and Global Garages, their program, for coming to the Marconi Foundation for Kids, Marconi Automotive Museum, and see what we do to help generate money for kids. We'd love to have you visit and see what we do and how we help children.